Hello, loves. This is Gemma with Drawing Down the Stars, and this is your reading for lunation number 1257, or the new moon of August. This begins the 6th lunar month, known as Sextilis. Now, in this month, it's full of ancient rituals, deep symbolic correlations to the Egyptian goddess Sopdet, as well as Greek and Roman gods and goddesses that indicate what is occurring within our celestial world and how it affects our terrestrial world. So let's dive in to first the stars and the placement of the planets, what is unfolding in the evolutionary cycle, and how we can work with it. So the 6th month begins essentially a shift into the next phase of evolution. And we see this really predominantly within our external nature or our natural environment. It's more evident in the sense of transitioning. Now, what this transition means essentially is a transformation from within. And it's a transformation of vital essence. And I want you to think about a transformation not only working with a lot of these Saturnian energies, because that's where the planet is currently, but it really, beyond that, when the sun moves against the stars and we have the moon in this placement, it is going to indicate essentially a transformative cycle from within, as I had mentioned, or the directive of the ideation. Now, to break down really quickly into these cycles from Pisces all the way through till this period, or the 6th month, ends the previous material cycle. It begins almost the next cycle in what form is going to produce. Okay? So there's a filling that's happening. And essentially what that is it's a filling within, a filling into the spaces, a filling that is unseen. There's also a new structure which is unknown. This is the position in which mystic power assists the successive phases of cosmic evolution. Symbolically, it's shown as the churning of the ocean or the extraction of poison from the depths. It's commonly indicated as transmutation in Western mysticism. This can create a greater clarity into subtle influences, especially on the deeper aspects of self or what lies within. And this also, due to that nature, because we are part and parcel, it indicates that this causes psychological isolation. And when we have this psychological isolation, I want you to think about it, creates a separation or a separating the wheat from the shaft. No? And what that happens is that we have revelations that begin to unfold, or the filling in when structure has been dissolved. Now, when we think of evolution, it is not one phase, very linear until the next phase. It all happens simultaneously. Everything is occurring all at once. It's just the ratio of which is occurring that is being expressed. So the dominant energy or nature is going to be more palatable. So we have this sense of dissolution or separation. Again, can cause psychological isolation. But what happens then is a filling in, this unseen force that begins to flood in. So when we, if you, in the sand, if you pull away the sand and how water immediately begins to fill in, I want you to think of it in that context. And when we look into this psychological isolation that begins to happen, and it's not for everybody, but it is the quality nature that begins to happen, what it fills in are sometimes is the revelations. Revelations either be into the poison within the self, because remember it is transformation from within, or what is poisoning the seed within the self. And what this does is allow us to understand what we have structurized within ourselves, but also our correlation to the nurturance in our surroundings. And this is really imperative because the key aspects of this month is preservation into the next cycle, protection into the next cycle, and of course, transformation for the next cycle. And it's about a revival into the next phase. And it helps provide more power, especially into the mental sphere. Let me emphasize that. The mental sphere in intelligence will be affected. The mental sphere within intuition will be affected. But what it does is it makes it the mind more hardy, more resilient. And that's the key aspect within this mental sphere being aspected, movement into the next phase, is it's going to create more resilience against the illusions of gain and loss, more resilience against essentially duality, allowing one to play the middle road. But it's going to offer mental resilience to a point of where it will propagate spiritual wisdom. And that's the key, is there's going to be an essence of guidance into the unknown, a structure of what you don't know, but you're guided into. And many of you might feel this more predominantly. I will say this too, that the 5th will become a lot more palatable, or the 5th lunar day of the month. Well, this is more prominent. And as always, this energy in nature begins to unfold over the entire month. So it's not just, bam, new moon, here it is, and this is this transformation. No. Everything is cyclical. So every month has its own cycle and is the cycle of this 6th month. And in sextilis, this entire month with the transformation within, will come into a full culmination mid-month, or what we know as the full moon, the Ides. And on the full moon, it'll offer an illumination, a culmination, the midway point that will further address the severance from the root. Now, this propagation is going to reveal poison that is at the root or the cause of separation from sources. In addition to that, it relates as a redirection or a seed. Just as a seed takes in a new ideation, a new form of evolution, the seed must go through the next phase, a dissolution into the next structured evolution, right? And that in and of itself takes a redirection. It takes a redirection of how it's utilizing its nutrients, going into formation, into the next evolutionary part to be more prosperous, abundant. And in addition to that, from our soul level, it's a next cycle that takes a preservative process. So it affects the patterns and the processes of becoming. Now, as you can imagine, this affects the patterns and processes of becoming. So it affects the aspects of nurturance. Now, by the full moon, the protective forces take course. So when we use that analogy of better understanding what's occurring within our cosmic world from the seed, there is a protective nature that begins to unfold to protect what is coming forward, both in our natural world, but also within the soul and our connection to the celestial world. It is both within ourselves and our natural world. So this protection takes in to taking course, how we become redirected, how the nurturance is going to feed the next direction of you. Now, this becomes from the full moon onward, more active energy, a more forceful energy, a more directive energy, very much more a Martian kind of influence that allows us to redirect, like a seed sprouting, redirecting upwards, in terms of how we will evolve, or how this next phase of ideation is to come forward. Now, every year, every cycle is a complete cosmic cycle. Every month holds a cycle. So we're looking already in that, the microcosm and the macrocosm, no? What this full moon will offer in that mid-month point is an illumination through the forces. So we look back into how we are separating, protecting, and nurturing, and allowing ourselves to become more mentally resilient, allowing patterns and processes, those that serve, to become protective, and a new force of nurturance and abundance to begin to fill into the space of those patterns. This allows a natural dissolution of structures and that are at play strongly with Saturnian energy, because on this new moon, we have Saturn retrograde in its own house. That's going to multiply its energy. Now with that, we have this direct because it's in Cancer, a direct reflection from Saturn. So Saturn's going to influence the way that we have imposed upon the structures within our soul self, and how we articulate that through the mind, and how we start to preserve our own patterning through that mind. And it's going to shift maybe for us to understand a different pattern in order for there to be a higher preservative quality, for the soul to evolve beyond that structure and pattern that the self had created previously. What this allows us to do is allow the Jupiterian nature to emulate. And that Jupiterian nature, again, is not so much of an expansion, but that filling in I mentioned. That it's always resided in there, but when there is space, because Jupiter likes to, i.e., expand or create more space, grow in essence, it likes to fructify, it's going to affect the progeny or how things are going to evolve, the next creative cycle, the children that emerge, or what is being birthed forward, the next creation. Now that we understand how the stars are being influenced, let's look deeper into the rituals. Because as always, as I mentioned, we are part and parcel of our natural world. And when we understand some of these ancient rituals, we better understand the natural world and the celestial influences and how to work in accordance with it. And I know you've heard me say this time and time again, but if we are naive to what is occurring around us, then we are simply reactive from an ignorant state. We learn about the stars and we draw them down so we can be proactive and work with the forces of nature and understand what is both occurring around us and within us, and so we can be proactive and not reactive. So let's look at the rituals again and allow them to better understand what's occurring. There's an emphasis in the cycle of regeneration through the festivals. And we see this in the festivals of Vinalia. And Vinalia is the time where you pick the grapes and it begins the first wine-making process, or where the first level of grapes have become ready to be preserved. Here we have this preservation, the vintage, the new year, the moving from one embodiment into a next preservative and more eternal phase, right? Because wine will last longer than the grape. So how here the grape has come forward and it's going to offer a second level of abundance, a second level of sustenance by moving into from its physical form into a more preservative form. This shows us the sustenance and the protection that is honored. These rites and festivals are echoed in the same Egyptian sentiments. So in ancient myth, this star and this time was connected from Sopdet, and that was around mid-July through August. And Sopdet is the goddess that is connected with the rise of Sirius. Now, this new moon will rise with the heliacal rise of Sirius. And we will see this in our natural world, and we know this as the dog days of summer. Now, why is it the dog days of summer? It's because Sirius, the brightest star, 6 times the strength of our own sun, or 6 times the size of our own sun, is the primary star in the constellation Canis Major. Canis meaning dog or big dog. So here in Egypt, they noticed that when the heliacal rise of Sirius came, then the Nile would flood. And it would flood their fields, bringing in abundance into their fields. We have this abundance that is echoed into our natural world through the shift of the waters through the rising of the star. Now, Sirius, we also notice in our external world. Notice we call it the dog days of summer because when Sirius comes into fruition or up with our sun, we have an immense amount of heat that comes for about a week or two. And we're in it right now. Right now are the dog days of summer. So the protection is not only to protect our crops from intense heat, but also to shift protection into the next stage. When anything shifts in the next stage, we have to honor it and protect it. And so in these festivals and rites, we're shown very quickly that abundance will begin to flow in. But it is also a deep correlation to the flows in from the waters. Now, I go further into Sopdet and Sirius in the notion under constellations, but let's just touch on it briefly here. Sopdet is also connected with the guidance of Osiris and the passage. This is a very key aspect because we see this passage of time I mentioned in the ritual Vinalia that happens in this month, a shifting of one form into the next. We talk about the passage from one state to the next, or cutting our sources, or the progeny, right? That progeny, the next creation, is a generation. It is a passage into a next form. But the passage is key here because there are additional rituals that really honor this passage and the reception of abundance. And that is known primarily as Portunalia. And in ancient Rome, Portunalia was the ports. And it honored the opening of the gates. They used to throw keys into the fire for good luck. And it was this opening of the gates that we see and where we welcome abundance. Because Portinalia is very closely connected to Janus, but it's also very deeply connected to Hecate. And then where that keys, if you know your myths, you know that Hecate, one of her symbols, is keys. Keys to the directions, keys to the doors. And they're not physical doors. It's doors and realms. So here we have this surging of divine wisdom. We have a trickling down or an usherance of abundance into our natural world. Do we not have another full harvest around the summer? But in addition to that, it is a passage within the worlds, from the spiritual and the physical. And so we see this into the directions of Portinalia and the mirroring in Hecate, the passage of worlds, and also into the Egyptian myth of Sopdet. Another key aspect that is outlined in this month that will come into fruition is honoring these qualities and natures that are either divinely given within us that must be honored and fructified. And those are things like hope, resilience, or perseverance, health. And all of these rituals are outlined in the notion, so just go to the link that is included. And you can read and have each day, both the lunar day and our current calendar day, and what these rituals mean. But essentially in this month, the sextilis, the 6th lunar month, we begin to prepare ourselves for the transformation from within. We begin to protect that transformation, and we begin to open the ways in which we will transform and create new directive. Now that new directive comes more into the full moon, right into culmination, and then fills out. But right now is a time to go within, allow yourself to be transformed, and redirect your tributaries. Redirect it to a source within and allow yourself into a passage into a higher realm. And it's only there that we receive a deeper wisdom. It is only there that we are starting to trickle down and receive the wealth and the abundance that lies within us. And that's what a lot of these rituals show, and that is what our natural world begins to unfold and how we work with it. All right, my loves, that is it for the 6th month, this new moon and full moon reading. Sending lots of love. And again, all of these links are included below. I've put together everything so you can have a nice, tidy place to reference. Tanti baci, lots of kisses. Until next time.